What else do we have, Mark?
How I Spent My Summer Vacation, which is the new movie starring and also co-written and produced by Mel Gibson, variously called Get the Gringo and El Pueblito. So the story... Mel is an American citizen at the beginning. He's in a getaway car. The getaway car crashes over the border. He then ends up in a Mexican prison where entire families are allowed to live if they have the resources. Teams up with a young kid who he inevitably will take under his arm because you know what? He's Mel Gibson. Here's a clip.
Got a cigarette?
Yeah.
Can I have one?
How old are you, kid?
18.
Get lost.
I'm 10. Can I have one now?
Nope.
You probably want me to keep my mouth shut. Well, Manuel's taco stand caught on fire. And Rodrigo, the doctor, seems to have some misplaced cash. If I talk, it's really gonna hit the fence.
Cigarette. Light. So, you're a watcher.
You learn a lot from watching.
What are you in here for?
Very funny. I'm only 10, man. My father was a dealer.
Was?
Yeah. I live here with my mom.
Speak pretty good English, kid. Where'd you learn?
Sesame Street. Chimorros.
What's with all the school kids going back and forth all the time?
You're not an inmate. You're free to go in and out.
What, they live here?
Yeah. If you have money, you can pay for your family to come live with you while you're serving time.
That's a new one. How come you don't go to school?
I'm special.
So this is kind of...
It's quite good.
Yeah,
Smart bit of dialogue.
Perfectly fine. The thing is, this is what happens when you torch your career. And the oddity of it is seeing... Once again, I'll tell you, if you've seen the trailer seems to represent a different movie. The trailer just looks like an out-and-out wacky comedy. It's actually more of a kind of hard-hitting action movie with some comedy in it. Mel Gibson, as you know, got himself into all manner of unspeakable trouble recently and therefore found himself not favourite of the month any longer in Hollywood circles. By the time the Beaver movie came out, in which he played a guy who talked through a beaver puppet, he was, he was absolute box office kryptonite. What do you do when you torch your career? You go back to basics. And Mel Gibson started out, Gallipoli aside, Mel Gibson first made his name making the Mad Max movies, making exploitation movies, making vengeance movies, making movies in which there was huge amounts of violence. And I remember going to see Mad Max and thinking, God, this is insanely violent. This is great. I hope they're going to make another one. And so the story here is he's in a Mexican prison, which is entirely peopled by, rampaging Mexican stereotypes. There is, drunkenness. There is violence. There is quite a lot of on-screen leering violence. There's, that because he's the heroic figure, he will do an awful lot of not being heroic, but he will ultimately take under his arm the child and indeed the mother, who would make it his job save against all these other vile, vicious stereotypes.
Does Pat Boone's Speedy Gonzales?
It doesn't, That
would have been a stereotype.
Yeah, that was the moment at which they obviously they missed a trick there. That doesn't feature big, unless maybe it did. And in the middle of me just going, blimey, yes. Anyway, but it is one of those really, really strange things when it's a sort of sleazy, stupid exploitation action movie that's put together, perfectly efficiently. And just looks like... it's interesting largely because it's Mel Gibson apparently going back to square one and going, OK, I'll play to this market and do that. And, of course, the violence thing is something that has run all the way through Mel Gibson's career. He is somebody who's, absolutely fond of screen violence, whether it's Apocalypto, which was, the main thing, which is insanely violent, whether it's Payback, where the violence was increased because of Mel's input, or, of course, whether it's Passion of the Christ, which I still hold is the most violent movie I have ever seen. just absolutely insanely violent. It's an exploitation, macho thing, full of all those things that you get in exploitation movies. It's just stereotypical dialogue, really, just leery, exploitative, and interesting because it's sort of fairly well honed and it's just, you remember like 10 years ago, Passion of the Christ became the biggest selling independent movie and the biggest selling foreign language film of all time. Foreign language meaning not in the English language.
I understood the concept.
Of foreign. All time. There was a point in the not too distant past when he was, bestriding the world of cinema like a colossus and taking huge amounts of money in the process of doing it and being able to make whatever pet project he wanted to make. Now he's ended up making How I Spent My Summer Vacation. And it is just strange because you think, this is bizarre. Isn't this the movie that you would have made 30, 40 years ago before everything went complete? Which is not to say that it isn't without a certain degree of exploitation, crass pleasure. But it is, but it's more of an oddity because you just think, I'm just really surprised to be seeing Mel Gibson doing this, but there he is.
But it sounds that you sort of enjoyed it anyway.
Well, what I felt was, if you're going to watch a crass exploitation movie, rather this than Piranha 3 Double D.